Hey guys, want to do a real quick, hopefully quick video on um, why you might want to be Fury Prot instead of full Prot or what's also known as deep Prot. Um, there's, I think, going to be a lot of people coming back into Classic. There are other videos out there, and by Classic I mean vanilla, not Classic Wrath or TBC or what is it now? Cataclysm's out now. Classic era, which is vanilla. There's other videos out there that go in more in depth. They're better produced. I'm not super interested yet in making highly produced YouTube videos, as you can tell if you've seen any of my videos. I just kind of want to get some information out there for folks. It's kind of quick and easy. Um, so when you first hit 60, while you're leveling to 60, you're probably not spec'ing the prot. And if you played years and years and years ago and you really didn't play on private servers when Fury Prot became a thing, you're probably wondering, what's the deal with Fury Prot? Why are people specking it? When do they spec it? How do they know when to use it? When to spec that versus deep prot, etc. Um, when you first hit 60 and you're doing 5 mans, I would recommend not specking Fury Prot. You can. Um, Deep Prot at that level of gear still gives you a decent amount of rage. I mean, even as Fury Prot, you're never going to be able to hold aggro in a 5 man off of a mage or a couple of mages who are casting Flame Strike and Blizzard, in the first second and a half of the fight, or a hunter whose first ability is always multi-shot. You're just not going to be able to hold threat off of that. Unless even if you have a paladin with blessing of salvation in the 5 man with you, 5 mans are it's threat ping pong. Even in I've got mostly Nax gear on my warrior. Obviously the 2.5 set, which is AQ40, but I've got a decent amount of Nax gear, including the Hungry and Cold from Kel'Thuzad, and I still have rogues and blues who can pull aggro off me if they open with an ambush as soon as I'm reaching the mob. Like, it's just a numbers game. Unless I get extremely lucky and carry over rage from a previous pull and get a bloodthirst crit right off the bat. If a rogue is ambushing for 2k or whatever, um, there's nothing I can do. I can taunt, but don't feel bad about losing threat, and don't run around trying to change specs around and whatnot. A lot of it is how other players play as well. But that being said, when you go to raid 20 mans, Zul'Gurub and AQ20, you step foot into MC and you're wearing blues, you might think that going deep prot is going to make you more tanky, more survivable. You're not going to die as often, and that is a little bit true. So some of the other videos, a pet peeve I have of some of these other Fury Prot videos is they say a full Prot warrior is no more tanky than a Fury Prot warrior, and from a talent standpoint, that's what they always say. Look at the talents. So I'm Fury Prot right now. I've got 2 into improve heroic strike. I've got bloodthirst, and I go down to defiance in protection. And they'll say, this is kind of a standard. Most of them get shield block, and I picked anticipation, and I can talk about that in another video. But normally you would see shield specialization at one point and improve shield block, but they stop here. They don't go down to the next tier. So when you look at the next tier, you have improved Sunder Armor, improved Disarm, improved Taunt, improved Shield Wall, Concussion Blow, improved Shield Bash, One-Handed Spec, and then Shield Slam. None of these, other than improved Shield Wall, are defensive. Disarm is on a 1-minute cooldown. So, 1-minute cooldown, disarms a weapon for 10 seconds. So 3 points adds 3 seconds. That's really, and in raids you cannot disarm. There's a lot of mobs you can't disarm. There's a lot of trash you can't disarm. I don't think you can disarm anything in MC. There's a few mobs in BWO you can disarm. Some of the captains you can disarm. I don't think any boss can be disarmed. I don't think any boss can be disarmed actually in any raid. Someone's probably going to correct me, but disarm is a defensive talent. Oh, you know what? I'm lying. In Nax, you can disarm 4 horsemen. That's actually a great strategy on 4 horsemen is to disarm them. But none of these none of these say increases your armor by 50% or reduces incoming damage by 10%. There's not like an improved defensive stance or anything like that. So from a talent perspective, these other videos are correct. Once you get Last Stand, which is a very nice talent, and if you pick shield spec and 1 point into shield block, even if you're full prot, I don't think you should spec more than 1 point into improved shield block. And then if you want to max out toughness, you can get extra armor. There's really nothing below this tier that gives you more defensive capabilities. Improved shield wall increases shield wall by 6 seconds if you max it out, and shield wall's on a 30-minute cooldown. 6 seconds over 30 minutes is it's not, you're not saving the world with this talent. But what you got to remember is when you spec this way, when you have shield slam, in order to use shield slam, you have to have a shield on. Okay, putting on a shield. Let's look at just like some MC shields. Well, I think there's only one. I think it's how it drops off Baron. Am I right? Not Baron? Gar. Drill bore disc, 2,500 armor. So I'm in 2.5 gear, mostly 2.5 in Nax gear, and I have right now unbuffed 6,000 armor. 2,500 armor that's a big jump. So yes, I can, I can throw on a shield as Fury Prot, but that's going to reduce my threat by quite a bit. So saying that if Prot War, and I'm going to have a shield on, even in a Nax raid, I'm going to have a shield on, I've never actually done the math, but I'm going to guess less than 5% of the time. There's almost no bosses that I put a shield on in Nax. In BWL, I put a shield on more than I put a shield on in Nax. And I do it in BWL usually right as Shadow Flame is being cast by any of the 3 Drakes, because those 3 Drakes have an ability called Thrash, and I don't want them to Shadow Flame me and Thrash me and kill me in that split second. But if you're going to wear a shield 100% of the time, because the shield is a requirement of you casting your main or one of your main threat abilities as a full Prot warrior, you by definition are going to be more tanky than a Fury Prot warrior. And I don't understand how people don't see that. So talent wise, yes, there are no talents in here really that increase your survivability, but you're going to have a shield on 100% of the time as a Prot warrior, or at least you should, unless you're some weird hybrid spec that's dual wielding and you got on a 1-hand specialization but you skip shield slam. I'd never seen that build before, but I'm just saying you should have a shield on, so you're going to be more tanky than a Fury Prot warrior. But you're going to put out less threat. So the reason people go Fury Prot is to put out more threat. So back in the day in vanilla, 20 years ago or however many years it's been, unless you were in a top tier guild in Nax, if you were just in a guild doing the 20 mans and MC and BWL, whatever, even BWL guilds, I didn't raid anything higher than MC back then, but I had friends who were in AQ40 and BWL guilds, and all of their warriors were full Prot. None of them, the Fury Prot really wasn't a thing back then, and if it was, it wasn't widely known, at least in the circles that I ran with. And every warrior, the warriors didn't even gear appropriately for being full Prot. And what I mean is, like, in today's world, we know, the hit cap is 9% for one-handers. So if you have a one-hander and a shield on, you need to be at least 9% hit. There weren't a ton of warriors that I knew running around with 9% hit. They wore They're tier sets, tier 1, tier 2. I knew a couple warriors that had a few pieces of tier 3. Tier 3 is the only set that has hit on it other than tier 1 gloves. The tier 3 set has the chest, I think, has 2% hit. Yeah, 2% hit. The shoulders have 1% hit. I don't think the helm has any. So even in full tier 3, you needed to get hit from other pieces. You need to have rings or, weapons or belt or whatever that had hit on it. And nobody really was paying much attention to that back then. And back then, there were threat meters, but the decree was, you wait for 3 sunders, at least 3 sunders on the boss, and then you can start doing threat, and then you need to watch the threat meter. Boss fights took a long time back then. So even in Nax, the guild I'm currently in, we kill bosses anywhere between 30 and 60 seconds. And I can tell you there are no bosses that I either, because I used to watch my friends play all the time back in the day. The internet was around and it was prevalent, but it wasn't like it is today. And we would go to each other's houses and watch. There wasn't streaming, there wasn't YouTube back then. We would go to each other's houses, and if you wanted to stream, you would sit behind somebody and look over their shoulder. That was streaming, back in the 90s and early 2000s. And boss fights were several minutes long, 3, 4, 5, 6 minutes long. So Fury Prot came about, and Fury Prot is a thing because it drastically reduces the amount of time that bosses live, because DPS can go crazy right off the bat and stay going crazy. You don't wait for 3 sunders. You wait about a second and a half, or you give the tank a global or 2. If you get 2 globals as a Fury Prot tank, your DPS are very disciplined. So you run in as a Fury Prot tank, and you're building rage by getting damage dealt to you, which is the traditional way of gaining rage as a tank. And also, you're stacking on top of that rage that comes in the form of you doing damage by dual wielding and pumping out damage through, your wide attacks. So you're building a lot more rage, and you have a lot more rage to use than a deep prot tank would, because a deep prot tank has a one-hander and a shield and is doing a little bit of damage, but they don't have anywhere near the attack power and the crit that you're going to have. The downside of a Fury Prot is you're going to be taking more damage because, like I said, you don't have a shield on in 99% of the cases. And because you are wearing gear that is optimized for crit and attack power after you hit the hit cap. So, if you see a lot of warriors running around in 2.5, and then you look at their other pieces and you see some defense, so I'm wearing my threat set right now, but I let me switch to one of my balanced sets is a 2-piece tier 3 a neck that has some mitigation, which in the form of defense rating, and then it has strength and agility, which are considered threat stats. My bracers are tier 3, so those have some strength for a little bit of AP, but these are mostly defensive in nature. My bow has attack power and crit on it. My trinkets are crit and attack power. So when you see that, you might think, oh, that's a DPS warrior. No, the DPS warriors would, unless they're wearing 2.5 in order to keep themselves alive. So Nax Ramus Military Wing is a good example where DPS warriors might put this gear on. But DPS warriors, for the most part, won't be wearing a lot of 2.5. They might have the shoulders and the legs on for the hit. The helm is okay, but there's other helms out there that are better. Lionheart is a better DPS helm than Conqueror's. But it doesn't have any stamina on it, as you can see. So it's not great for Fury Prot tanking. But the idea here is to... so if I go back to my threat set, you can see, and I'm unbuffed. I have no buffs right now. I have 25% crit, 6% hit, which is at the cap, because I'm a human. Plus I have extra sword skill through Hunger and Cold. And then my attack power is over 1,000. It's 1,100. So the idea here is to pump out as much, and I have, I don't have mitigation trinkets. I'm not using stylines or life-giving gem. I use these very, very rarely, because I use these to pump out more threat. So when I run in and pull, I'm popping Slayer's Crest, and when after 20 seconds and that buff goes away, then I pop Earth Strike, and so I'm getting 260 attack power for 20 seconds, and then 280 for another 20. So for 40, for some boss fights, I can have increased attack power for the entire fight, almost 300 extra attack power, which is huge. With Deep Prot, you can't pump out that kind of threat, and I just wanted to show, and I can do another video later to kind of go more in depth on the stats and when you should swap, if you should swap, that type of thing. In general, if you want to know should I go Fury Prot or not, you probably should talk to your guild. Talk to your leadership, your GM, the tank officer, whatever you have, and what are the other warriors in the guild doing? If all the other warriors are Fury Prot and they're tanking and the healers are keeping them up, and you're in MC, or even if you're just starting out in 20 mans, as long as the healers can keep you alive, more threat is always better, because that means that when the DPS see that if they look at the threat meter and they see that you're 50% above them, for one, you have the option of putting a shield on at all times. So I have a macro that I hit shield block and my shield goes on in defensive stance. Then I have a macro to swap back to dual wield. So if you have a massive threat lead as Fury Prot, you can put on a shield and start being a little more survivable, for 10 or 20, whatever seconds, however long you want to have a shield on. But if the healers are struggling to keep you up, you probably shouldn't be Fury Prot. You either need to get some better gear, some better Fury Prot gear. You're wearing too much, DPS gear. You're wearing leather or mail or something like that. Or the healers need to get better gear. But if the healers are not having an issue, and that's the other thing, if your DPS is really geared, you probably need to be Fury Prot so that they can kill bosses as quickly as possible. If your DPS are not geared, or they're not good enough to pump out massive DPS, which massive DPS equals massive threat, then you can probably be Deep Prot. And as long as you can hold aggro, the main thing is to hold aggro and live. You don't want to die, because a tank dying on any encounter increases the likelihood of the raid wiping by a lot. It's not 100% wipe. In most cases, it is 100% wipe, but it's not always 100% wipe. So you want to stay alive. But you being alive and not being able to hold threat is not very useful either. So you kind of want to balance it, and that's really what being a Fury Prot tank is. It's all about balance. You don't want to, when you look at my gear, this is my threat gear, and I have 340 defense. So against bosses, this is not really a set that I use against bosses. This is a set that I use against trash. Because bosses, as you can tell, I only reduce, so defense is good because it reduces your chance to be hit and critically hit. So bosses will miss you more often, and they will critically hit you less often. And it increases your chance to dodge, block, and parry. Block is not really that good. Dodge and parry are really good as Fury Prot. Because you're building, usually you have more rage than you know what to do with. Dodge and parry for a Deep Prot tank is not that good. And that's kind of where the rub is with Deep Prot. So you might be fine being Deep Prot in MC, and then you get to BWL and you start getting, tier 2 gear and, other defensive gear, and you find out that you're either dodging, parrying, or the boss is missing you in a string. Let's say for 3 or 4 swings in a row, the boss swings, you dodge. The boss swings, you parry. The boss swings, you parry. The boss swings and misses. So that's 6 seconds or so where you got 0 rage because you didn't get hit. And your one-hander is building a little bit of rage and a little bit of threat, but you need to use your abilities. Like, you need to use your abilities on cooldown and as often as possible. Like in the case of Revenge, which is a proc. So Deep Prot in that regard doesn't really scale very well, because the better gear you get for Deep Prot, the less you're going to get hit and the less damage you take from those hits. So bosses will hit harder as you go up in the tiers. So bosses in MC don't hit as hard as bosses in AQ40 and Nax, for example. Um, but you are adding stats like defense rating and dodge and parry that completely remove. So when you get hit and you block, you still eat some of that damage. You can't block 100%. So my block value in this gear is really low, 40. So every time I block 47.8 damage, which is not a lot. If I put let's put my mitigation gear on and let's see what that goes up to. So I'm in mostly tier 3. I don't have the gauntlets on because I need the hit rating because I don't have a DFT or anything cool yet like that. This is like all mitigation gear. Tier 3, I don't have the Cthulhu neck, but this is my mitigation neck. I need the hit rating from the cloak. Still don't have the Crypt, whatever it's called, not Crypt Stalker, the Crypt Fiend cloak from a noob. Let me probably put my shield on. So with the shield on, I still have 6% hit. Now my block value is 209. So 209 damage is what when I block, and I have a chance of block without having shield block up of 23.5%. So when I block, I'm going to block 209 damage, and that's unbuffed. That'll go up with, I think that goes up with strength, right? Yeah. So your strength increases the amount of damage that can be blocked. So if I get Blessing of Kings and Mark of the Wild and a few other things, this will go up a little bit. And there's trinkets, you like Lotheb's Reflection, or not Lotheb's Reflection. That's not right. That's a magic resistance. Oh no, here it is. Glyph of Deflection. So this trinket increases your chance to block, increases your block value by 23, and then the use increases the block value of your shield by 235. So I basically could double my block value if I have that trinket on every 2 minutes. I could use that for 20 seconds. This is kind of a meme trinket. It's good in a few instances, but it's not something that I would wear all the time because, again, you don't want to be you want to be taking damage to get rage as long as your healers can keep you alive. So let me go back to my threat set. Okay, so what I wanted to show you guys is, because another thing that I see in some of these other videos about Fury Prot is that Deep Prot can keep up with Fury Prot until your DPS are doing like 1,000 DPS. And supposedly that's without Blessing of Salvation. With Blessing of Salvation on the Alliance, it gets even better. And I've looked at that in the sim, and I don't think that that's accurate. And I've experienced it in even in BWL. So BWL is not, I don't want to say it's easy because it's not. There's people that will say, oh yeah, Nax is easy. Okay, there's a lot more guilds clearing Nax in Classic than there were back in the day in Vanilla. That's not even like a question. Of course there are. There's a lot of folks who have had private servers for years, and there's YouTube now. There's a lot of detailed strategy videos. You know, people are older. People who played original Vanilla that were 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, are now in their 30s. And they're just better at video games than they were back then. But like people say it all the time. Even the guild I'm in now is like mostly a dad guild. And we all have kids. And I played Classic WoW, the vanilla version of Classic WoW when I was in my early 20s, and I can tell you that I was not nearly as good at video games as in my early 20s as I am now, especially this game. So Nax is not easy. There are times where we still have a hard time and wipe on trash and lose our buffs, and it's unfortunate, and it happens. It doesn't take a lot of screwing up to wipe in Nax. It takes a lot more screwing up in Molten Core to wipe. BWL, it takes a little less screwing up. AQ40, it takes a little less screwing up. By the time you get to Nax, you really need to have 40 people. We can clear MC with 20 of our Nax Raiders. And we can still wipe on trash with those 20. But we will clear MC with 20 people in the same amount of time it would take 40, people geared in MC and BWL gear to do it. And it's just because we overgear it, and we have done it so many times. It's just, it's not a super hard raid as long as you're paying attention to the mechanics. So, the content in BWL is not what I would say easy, but if you know the fights and you execute on the mechanics, it can seem easy. That being said, I have been in raids where there are deep prot tanks, and on a fight like Veilstraz, which is the second boss of the instance, that fight is a DPS race because he forces a tank swap roughly every 45. So I think the first Burning Adrenaline's 45 seconds, then it's 30 seconds after that. Most guilds, if you go and look at Warcraft logs, most guilds kill Veilstraz in less than 45 seconds. And that's mostly because of how much DPS they're pumping out. You need to kill. If you don't kill him within 45 seconds, the main tank gets Burning Adrenaline and is guaranteed to die. So if you don't have a tank second on threat and he turns to the DPS and cleaves and flame breaths, I don't care what gear you're in, you're going to die. You could be full Bis Warrior and full Bis Nax gear with, Gressel, Hungry, and Cold, whatever. You're going to die. Veilstraz hits very hard. I wear a modified version of this threat set for Veilstraz. The only reason that boss, that Fury Prot works well on that boss is because the healers have unlimited mana, and they're mostly just spamming you. There's not a ton of raid damage going out. There is some, but if he turns to anyone besides the tank, it's basically going to be a wipe. That's not a boss that you can goof around on. And in my opinion, deep prot tanks cannot tank that fight unless you have 4 or 5 of them stacked up. Now, Ferals are very good at that fight because Ferals can build a lot of threat as an off tank. And I don't want to get into a whole thing about Ferals versus Warriors. I do think that there's a spot in a raid, even in Nax, for one Feral Druid. You probably don't want to have a ton of them, but Feral Druids are very good off tanks and very good what we call chase tanks. So that means being second on threat. So that way, if the main tank does die or is expected to die, then you have the Feral there. Fury Prots are good also because you can build a ton of threat through your damage and you're not getting hit. Deep Prot, if you think Deep Prot is good, go fight Hakar and Zul'Gurub, which is a 20-man, and which is another fight that Hakar is not tauntable, and you have to have a tank as the top 2 threat have to be tanks. Go in there with 2 Deep Prot warriors and have them not let any DPS die, and don't have the fight last 5 minutes. It's not easy. It's very difficult to gain threat and keep threat as an off tank or a chase tank as Deep Prot. It's possible, you can do it, but so is being a paladin tank. It's possible, but the lengths you have to go in order to do it are just not worth it. So let's look at here's a tank sim. You can see the address here. I've used this before just to check and see. This is not just like any other sim, Guybrush and some of the others. I would say this is not gospel. Don't treat it as such. But this is a good guideline on if you change gear, what is your expected output. So you pick your race, which I'm a human. If you're a night elf or whatever, you can change that. You pick all your gear. You pick all your enchants. You pick your trinkets, you pick your weapons, axes, daggers, fists, mace, swords, and then you pick your buffs. And then it kind of spits back out. Here's what your character sheet should look like. Here's what your hit rating is. Here's your crit rating, here's your attack power. Here's your armor. So you can do this with and without buffs. Right now I have it with raid buffs, which are these. So, and this is alliance. This is considering alliance. Blessing of Kings, Blessing of Might, Fortitude, Mark of the Wild. Don't have world buffs in here. Let's go ahead and do Flask of the Titans. We'll do Gift of Arthas. Devotion Aura, Inspiration, not improve lay on hands because you're not going to have that every single fight. There are certain fights that you have that. And then I have my, personal buffs here. So this is for a Prot spec. So Shield Slam, and then you just go down and pick what number of points do you have in each talent. So this is just a typical Impale Prot spec. So you have Cruelty, you have Anticipation, Shield spec, Toughness, Improved Heroic Strike, Improved Sunder Armor, one hand. You don't have Flurry, you don't have Enrage, you don't have Dual Wield spec, because those are all within the Fury tree. And I picked out just all tier 1. So this is all tier 1 gear with a couple of the things. This is what I would expect a quote unquote molten core tank to look like. And there's probably other pieces that you could pick. If you wanted to be deep prot, I'm not an expert on deep prot gear sets. There's actually not a lot of information out there on like what's the absolute best. And it's probably a little difficult because with deep prot, Shield Slam scales off of block value, and there's not a ton of gear that gives you block value. You just want as much strength as possible. But you also want to have dodge, defense, the same that a Fury Prot warrior would want. And I'm picking tier 1 because there's a lot of Fury Prots that are going to start out and they're going to use tier 1 gear, which is fine. Fury Prot, in my opinion, really doesn't start to shine until you get 2.5 gear. That doesn't mean you can't be Fury Prot without 2.5 gear. You can, but it really starts to shine when you get 2.5 gear because that gear has so much agility and stamina, stamina and agility and strength, and it has a little tiny bit of defense on each piece. Plus there's hit on 2 of the pieces, which is huge. So even the breastplate, that's this one. 38 stamina, 34 strength. That's a lot. That's 68 attack power. And then every 20 agility on a warrior is 1% crit. So almost 1% crit right there. Almost 1% crit. The breastplate is more than 1%. I don't have the boots because the boots are not that great. And then 1% on. I mean, it's a great set. The bonus is really not that great, but even then, like sometimes you want a battle shout, you only have 6 or 7 rage. That it reduces it from 10 down to 6.5, I think it is. So when you have 7 rage, you can battle shout, or demo shout, or challenge, or challenging shout. All of your shouts. What was it? Oh, it was a piercing howl. That's still 10 rage. That doesn't count as a shout, I guess. Yeah, it's still 10 rage. So what you do is you fill all this out. Okay, and I have the swing damage is 2,500 to 4,000. This is supposed to be unmitigated, so this isn't actually what you would be hit with. It's before your armor, and this is not going to be for every boss because some bosses have magic damage, some bosses have environment damage, and you're going to get more rage. But this is just, like I said, a kind of a baseline of what's my DPS I could expect and what's my threat per second I could expect. So I just ran the numbers. Here's the results that are down here, and there's a graph with your threat distribution, and this is kind of worst case scenario, what you would expect around the average, best case scenario, like you're getting a major string of crits or whatever. And it gives you some interesting information. So it tells you your threat per second is 700, your DPS is 279, and that's because DPS does equal threat, but there's a lot of talents and abilities that give you more threat. So when you have 5 out of 5 Defiance, that increases your threat generation when you're in defensive stance. So your DPS. So if you're looking at Guybrush, which I used to do quite a bit, and you're just saying you're looking at it, you're going, oh, I'm going to do 600 DPS. That means, I'll probably be doing around 800 threat. You're going to be doing a lot more than that. Your TPS is always going to be a lot higher than your DPS. Your DTPS, which is damage taken per second, this number highly depends on your armor value, and it also depends on what you put in for the swing damage. So this is going to be on a boss. I don't really use this for DTPS because this needs to be better fleshed out for DTPS in my opinion. What I'm really looking at is what's my expected threat per second, and then I look at my ability TPS. Like, what are my abilities that are doing the most? And with this, you can see your main hand is actually doing a little bit more than Shield Slam, but Shield Slam is right up there. And then Heroic Strike, and then Revenge, and then Battle Shout, and then Gift of Arthas, and then Sunder Armor. So let's leave this gear, and this is all tier 1 with Kelsorar and Jobora Disc. Kelsorar is very easy to get. This is not like a pre-raid list. This is tier 1 or phase 1, I should say. You'll have to grind for a couple of these things for Hand of Justice and Counterattack Lodestone, which comes from Direwall North, but you can pretty easily get that these days, or buy it. So I'm not going to change any of the gear. So we'll just snapshot this real quick. So right around 700. Okay, now let's say, because you guys are saying, oh, you're not world buffed. Okay, well let's get rend even. Let's get crazy and get rend, and let's not do DMF. So then we'll do Songy, we'll do attack power, we'll do stamina. So now we are raid buffed and we're world buffed. And this is probably I'm gonna guess it's about 1,000. 925. Okay, a little lower than I thought. So your DPS only goes up by 120, 130. And your TPS goes up by 200 and change, 220, 230. So it really didn't go up a ton, your threat per second. So this is why people say, or you'll hear people say, Deep Prot doesn't really scale that well with world buffs. It doesn't, and we have Impale, and we have a lot of crit. We have 35% crit with all these buffs. But you're and let's look at our now Heroic Strike is the top TPS, then main hand swing, then Shield Slam. Shield Slam didn't go up hardly at all. Shield Slam went from 162 to 175. Let's take these back off, because now what I want to do is change this. So I'm going to take Shield Slam off. Now we're going to make this think we are Fury Spec. So we don't have Deflection anymore. We do have Cruelty. We do have Anticipation. I have that in my... Actually, let's just make that 0, because that's extra defense rating. Shield Spec, let's say we have... We'll just say 0, because we're going to act like we don't have a shield on. Only 3 in that. Let's say... It is possible to have 3 out of 3 improved Heroic Strike. Let's leave this at 3 so it's equal. No, we don't have improved Sunder Armor. We don't have one-handed Spec. We do have Flurry. We will have Enrage, because Enrage is required to get to Flurry. We will not have Impale. We will have Defiance, and we will have Dual Wield Spec. Okay. So we left all the gear. Let's take the shield off. So instead of the shield, we're going to go to a sword, and we're just going to do Mira's Song. So you might get lucky and have an offhand Warblade, or you might get... I'm not going to do... If I do dual Warblades in here, that's not going to be fair. You could do Brutality Blade as an offhand. That's not a terrible offhand, but I'm just going to... I'm trying not to skew this... Let's log back in so you can see my character. So we might go back over that. I'm trying not to skew this in the towards Fury Prot. I'm not changing any of my buffs. Not changing in fight length, not changing the damage incoming, any of this stuff. Okay, now let's calculate it. And if we pull this, so we were at 699 and it went from 699 to 925 when we added world buffs. So this is raid buffed, no world buffs. Same gear, tier 1, same hit, same 6% hit. That's it. We're not getting extra hit. We're 24% crit, same that we were before. Same attack power, same everything. We're just changing our talents around, and now our expected TPS goes from 700 to almost 1100. Our heroic strike is putting out 500 threat per second, which is almost as much as all three of the top. It's as much as these two combined: the main hand swing and shield slam. Just heroic strike. When you are a Fury Prot, and that's because you have that much more rage to dump into heroic strike. It's not that heroic strike is hitting that much harder, because we really don't have. We're heroic striking with the same weapon, and heroic strike does. I gotta pull out my spell book because my macros are freaking out. So heroic strike does melee damage, increases melee damage by 157. And causes a high amount of threat. I think the high amount of threat is an extra 175, if I remember correctly. But you're going to have a lot more rage in order to dump into heroic strikes. And this is what you're going to see no matter what I change the gear to. And this is what you'll see even if I don't have Discord open, or I'd pull up one of my logs. When I run Nax and when I tank bosses, heroic strike is my number one casted ability by far. By far. It is. Over the course of a 2-hour Nax raid, I cast heroic strike, and even in MC and BWL it's the same. But I cast heroic strike because it doesn't have a cooldown. It's your next main hand swing. So if your main, and Kelstar is a 2.2 weapon, which is not super slow or super fast. It's kind of in between. But when you get like Hakari Warblades, for an example, when you got that 1.7 main hand, or if you get daggers and you get core leather gloves or something, if you're a human and you get daggers, I don't really necessarily agree with that, but whatever. That's why daggers are so good for tanking, because you can pump heroic strikes out. Then my offhand swing, and then bloodthirst. So you might think bloodthirst is pumping out this crazy amount of threat, and it does, but it's on a cooldown, 6 seconds. Wish my macros are working. So I didn't have to open my spell book up. So it's on a 6-second cooldown. So even if you're critting, if I'm fully raid buffed and world buffed, I've crit some bloodthirsts for 2300, and bloodthirst doesn't have an extra threat component to it like heroic strike does and like shield slam does. But if you're critting for that high every 6 seconds and you're using it every 6 seconds, that's a lot of threat. But when you run it out over the timeline and you're heroic, so if you're bloodthirsting every 6 seconds and you're heroic striking every 1.5 or 1 point, with flurry up, you're around 1.5 seconds with a fast weapon, sometimes even lower. Your heroic strikes are going to end up doing more threat overall, even though they don't hit as hard. I've never had a 2K heroic strike, but I've had a bunch that are 1,000, and then they happen. Like I said, if you get 2 or 3 or 4 that crit, and you're casting them every 1.5 seconds on a boss fight, that's a lot of threat. Revenge is still not very high on the list, and Revenge is not a very high threat ability, but you want to cast it because of its threat per rage. So it's only 5 rage to cast it, and it is on a cooldown, but you still want to cast Revenge. It's worth casting because it is very cheap, and the amount of the amount of threat you get for it is worth it. Then we have Battle Shout, then we have Main Hand Swing, and the Main Hand Swing is low because we're doing Heroic Strike so much that this replaces our Main Hand Swing. So you might have expected, Main Hand Swing, Offhand Swing, Bloodthirst to be up here, but Main Hand Swing actually does a lot less than the Main Hand Swing for full Prot, just because you have so much rage to dump into Heroic Strike, and that's taking the place of your Main Hand Swing. And then we have Sunder Armor and Gift of Arthas are about the same. They're right in there. So even in this, and this is not optimized for Fury Prot at all. There's a lot better gear from So a much better set would be the ZG set. The ZG set is like a baby AQ40 set for Fury Prot. So I'm just trying to show that, if you have people that are telling you, yeah, you can do just as much threat, as deep Prot. Well, in tier 1 gear, that's not true. You can see, it's not close. It's 300 threat per second, and that's per second. That's not 300 threat over the course of the fight. That's 300 threat per second, and I did this as a 60-second fight. So you can do the math. There's a lot more threat that you gain by being Fury Prot. Now let's see the real benefit of Fury Prot. Whoops, not DMF. Stamina, attack power, Songflower. So now world buffed, if you remember, we went from 699 to I think it was 925. So full Prot, deep Prot, did not really scale that well off of world buffs. But now we're going to see what this does. So 1075 to probably, I'm going to guess 1500 or so, 1400. More than I thought, 1567. That's a lot of threat in tier 1 gear. That's actually a whole lot. Now, this amount of threat over a 60-second fight, and you're wearing tier 1, so you're still kind of chunky. This all has stamina and defense on it. Do you need this much threat? That's kind of that's what you need to ask yourself to decide, do I need to be Fury Prot or not? If you're doing 15, basically 1600 or just under 1600 threat per second, and this is the expected result. This is not the 99th percentile result. If you're top DPS, because for DPS, their threat per second is actually lower than their DPS, because rogues, warriors in berserker stance, mages, like everybody has either a baked in threat reduction. So rogues produce, I think it's 0.85 threat for every point of damage they do. And they also have vanish. Everyone, I think, except for hunters, has a baked in or a talent to reduce their threat. And hunters can feign death every, I think it's 30 seconds. So if you have a rogue that's doing 1,000 DPS, their threat per second is not going to be 1,000. It's going to be around 850 or somewhere in that range, because the modifier for their threat is not the same as yours. So then in that case, you could say, okay, well, I don't need world buffs then, or maybe you just don't need rent, because some of these world buffs are damage increasing, and some of them are, so like the stamina buff from Dire Maul, you probably want to go get that. You probably don't need Songflower, which is extra crit. The attack power, while you're in DM, you might as well get both. Spirit of Zandalar increases all your stats. Dragon Slayer increases crit. Yeah, I can't see them while they're booned. But that might make you decide to say, well, I'm just going to get a couple world buffs. I'm not going to... And it depends on your guild, if all your DPS are getting all these buffs, maybe you need to go get them. If nobody's getting them, then maybe you don't, because you don't need that much threat. Or you could say, I'm going to go get world buffs, but I'm going to wear, instead of... So that dropped me down to 1,200 threat per second, dropping a few these world buffs off. Or maybe you guys die a lot, and you just say, I can't expect to have world buffs for the whole raid, so I'm going back to what it was. I forget what we said. I think it was 1,070 something, 1,090. So you can use this as a tool to kind of figure out, for one, you can figure out gear upgrades and how they affect your threat. And then for two, you can look down here and see, how much threat am I going to pump out, and do I need that much threat or not? I wouldn't suggest taking points out of any of these. So you could drop points out of dual wield spec and your offhand damage is going to go down. I probably wouldn't suggest that because that's also going to start rage starving you. That's why Fury Prot scales so well, is because the more rage you get, the more damage you do, and you do more white damage. Every one of these buffs gives Fury Prot a lot more white damage than it gives to Full Prot, because Full Prot only has one weapon in order to use that buff, because you have a shield in the other hand and you're not hitting with your shield except for Shield Slam, and Shield Slam doesn't scale on attack power or scales a little bit with crit, but not like Fury Prot does. But you could run through and punch in all. I'm not going to do it, but you could punch in all of the ZG gear and see oh wow, that bumped my threat up by, now I'm at 1500 instead of 1000 with just raid buffs on. So maybe that means I can tell my DPS like, hey, you guys need to start getting world buffs because you're not keeping up with me now. Instead of me not keeping up with you, you're not keeping up with my threat. But I just wanted to show you guys this tool and just kind of compare. And then so we can go over now. Let's jump over to my gear real quick. So this is actually what I'm wearing in the game right now. So Conquerors, which is 2.5. All the Conqueror stuff's 2.5. Plated A-bomb ribcage. I have the same. I'm assuming we're fighting the same boss. Same 60 seconds. This is probably a boss in BWL. Let's not world buff me. Let's take my world buffs off. And I haven't run this yet, so I can't scroll down because I haven't run it yet. And I am Fury Prot spec. So go down through my points. I'm Fury Prot spec, right? So let's see. Let's see what this comes out to be. Oh, I forgot to check these off. Oh well. Okay, 1261. So without world buffs, 1261. I think I had inspiration and devotion already, did I not? That's just going to increase my armor. I'll just take less damage, which will probably be worse. Let's just rerun it anyway. And don't forget that, if you change a piece of gear and it bumps it by 10 threat per second, okay, so it actually I think went down. Don't forget, this is per second. So when DPS get upgrades and they go from like 630 to 640 or 630 to, a 10 or 20 DPS upgrade to a DPS is a good upgrade. When you put world buffs on, you're kind of amplifying everything like crazy. So, but when you get a different weapon, it's not like you're increasing your DPS by 2 times. You're not going from 600 DPS to 700 DPS just by changing a weapon. Unless you're taking a Mira Song and you're replacing it with a max weapon or something. I mean, they're just not that different. They're better, but when you change a piece of gear, like let's just say like I take plated A-bomb ribcage off. Let's say I put Conqueror's breastplate on, which is those 2 pieces of gear are really not that. A-bomb ribcage is much more DPS oriented, so I should see my threat per second drop a little bit. So it went from 1218 to 1193. So that's actually a pretty good. Oh shit! I just got a buff. Store that. That's why I wanted to be in game, just in case something like that happened. So plated A-bomb ribcage, and I also dropped my hit down to 5%, I think. Yeah, my hit goes down to 5% because I'm relying on that hit from A-Bomb Ribcage. A-Bomb Ribcage has 90 attack power, 25 stamina, 1 crit, 1 hit. So that probably wasn't the best example. I mean, it's 34 strength. So let's see. And see, this is what you can do. Whoops. So take it from... So my hit's at 5. So I'm going to swap out Applied Force to Dragon Slayers. Not Dragon Slayers, this one. To get my hit back up to 6. Now let's run it. I think it was 12-18. Having that 1% hit missing probably hurt me quite a bit. 1196, so not that bad. But you can see how changing the gear pieces around, like losing that hit was really not that big of a deal. So it dropped me down to 1% miss rate essentially. Now let's see. Let's leave everything the same. I'm going to take Hungry and Cold off. Put a shield on. So now let's do a new one. So my TPS in this gear. Now I'm going to do the reverse and say let's put on a shield. Oh wait, we didn't pick a shield yet. Let's pick let's just say I've got Face of Death, which I don't have that yet. Best shield in the game. Shield Slam. I forgot to check that for my 3 set for 2.5, but that's fine. So now I'm going to do Deflection, Cruelty, Anticipation, Shield Spec, Toughness, Improved Heroic Strike, Improved Thunder Armor, One-Handed Spec, 0 Flurry, 0 Enrage, 2 Impale, and then 0. So now I am full Prot with this gear on, which is much more DPS oriented. So we're not going to put on tier 3 and make this a defensive set. This is an offensive set using a full Prot build. We're still at 6% hit. Now let's see how much of a difference this is. So it dropped to 819. So that's almost 400 threat per second. That's a huge drop. That's like a 33% drop. And that's using gear that has a lot of attack power and crit. If I change this to all tier 3, it would be, let's go ahead and do that. Dreadnought. Couldn't think of the name for a second. So I'm going to leave the Sadist. Let's just do the Cthulhu neck, which is called Mark of Cthulhu. Dreadnought. We'll leave on Cloak of the Scourge. We'll need the hit probably. Dreadnought. Wrists. Dreadnought. Dreadnought. Where's the D? Dreadnought. Waist. Dreadnought. Legs. Dreadnought. Feet. We're probably not gonna have enough hit. We'll figure. I'll probably slide in DFT here. So we'll leave this ring on, and then we'll do Band of Curia. So that way, we're at 8% hit. We don't need DFT, even though DFT is. Let's do DFT anyway because, and then we'll do Stylines, and then we will do. Wait, we got way too much hit. So let's do Dreadnought Ring for 1. Or is it Ring of the Dreadnought? Ring of the Dreadnought. And dropped hit down a little bit, and then Band of Curia should drop it down even more. So let's pick What else would I wear? Probably Ring of Veclor. Or maybe Ring of the Godslayer, one of these two. Doesn't really matter. Now we're down to 7% hit. We have DFT on. We have Soul String. Soul String's not a terrible pick because it has attack power hit and but there's no ranged weapon that's going to give you. Toxin Injector has more stamina, I think. There's no ranged weapon that's going to give you block value to scale your what do you call it? Shield Slam. So we're at 819. Now we're in full tier 3. Best neck in the game for, let's change this to, oh, we don't need this hit. I was wrong. So let's change this to Crypt Fiend. Oh, Crypt Fiend has hit on it anyway. Okay. And we're over defense cap. So we're uncrittable. So I would probably change a few of these pieces out to not be over the defense cap, but you're uncrittable without pressing shield block in this gear. And you're hit capped, more than hit capped. Your crit is only 16.8 though, so you could take some pieces off and try to get some more crit. Maybe take Ring of the Dreadnought off and put on QSR. I mean, there's not a ton of places you're going to be able to add. Let's see, Quick Strike Ring. That adds some attack power. Takes stamina away though and takes dodge away. So we're not. I'm just trying to make a point that in tier 2.5, you're probably going to do more threat per second than in. So it's 819. Let's see what the difference is. This might have enough block value to overcome it. But I have a feeling it's going to be very similar. 688. That dropped quite a bit. Over 100. By putting on tier 3. Now you can change a few pieces around. I don't think you're going to have enough pieces to change around to get down to 440 defense. We're only 4 over right now. I could even drop anticipation a couple points and get rid of some of that. You're not going to make up that 100 and something threat per second. So you can see what I mean by what I said earlier. In that tier 1 gear, you were doing similar threat per second. And it's because you're taking a lot less damage in this gear, and which means you're getting less rage. And you're not generating a ton of threat with your one-hander. I mean, your main hand swing is your top threat per second ability at 221. And we were generating almost that with our offhand swing in a Fury Prot build. So that's just how much better Fury Prot scales when it comes to raid buffs and world buffs. There's no blessing from a paladin that's going to increase your shield slam damage by giving you more block value. I mean, more strength does increase block value by some. I don't have the conversion in front of me, but if you go and do the math, like, you need a ridiculous amount of strength in order to make block value move the needle. Whereas for Bloodthirst does what did I just push? Bloodthirst does 45% of your attack power. And 1 strength is 2 attack power. And you get tons of strength from your gear, and you get lots of strength from raid buffs, and you get lots of strength from world buffs. So every 2 strength, every strength you get, let's see. That doesn't tell you. Every strength you get is 2 attack power. Let's go look it up real quick. Probably won't be able to find it. So I haven't tested this obviously, and I just looked it up, but this is saying you get to block 1 damage for every 20 points of strength. So that means for Shield Slam, you're getting an extra like 1 more damage for every 20 strength, if that's how it scales. Yeah, causes damage modified by your shield block value. So I'd have to look up what that value is. So what that modification is, but let's just assume it's 1-to-1. So every 20 points of strength, you also get 40 attack power, which the attack power doesn't directly affect Shield Slam, but the 20 points of strength do, and it converts down to 1 damage. So you can convert it down to 1 extra damage or up to 40 attack power, basically, by being Fury Prot. That's why people spec Fury Prot, and that's why it scales so much better. If Shield Slam scaled off of attack power or strength directly instead of indirect, like it kind of indirectly does, it scales downwards, basically. Like it scales up, but it doesn't scale up at a very good pace. Whereas Bloodthirst is always 45% of your attack power. So it's a flat 45%. It's not 45% plus weapon damage or, weapon damage plus 45% of your attack power. It's just 45% of your attack power. But you also have things like Crusader that can go off during a fight, which Crusader adds 100 strength, which is 200 attack power. So if you take 45% of that, just Crusader going off in a raid is going to make your next Bloodthirst hit by 100, a little bit less than 100 damage extra, plus all the Paladin buffs and all that. So that's why Fury Prot is a thing, and that's why it's even in Nax, like especially in Nax, unless you want to drag the fights out and make them longer like they were in vanilla, you want to be Fury Prot. If it's early in your raiding career and you're running MC, you're running the 20 mans, you can be deep Prot. It's probably going to be more difficult. I would still suggest, as long as you have a discussion with your healers and your guild leadership, I would suggest going Fury Prot. You can wear leather, but you shouldn't. You shouldn't be running around in Devil Sword leather and trying to tank. You should be wearing plate. As I've shown in this video, you can wear tier 1 from MC, which is not optimized for Fury Prot at all. But you can wear it and still put out even in the worst case scenario. Let's just say you're terrible at hitting Bloodthirst on cooldown. As long as you're hitting Heroic Strike, you're going to put out almost the same amount of threat as a full Prot tank in his ideal conditions, with the buffs that are the same. If he's world buffed and you're not, the deep Prot's probably going to out threat you, not by a ton. But if you just learn how to hit Heroic Strike, and then you have your offhand swing, right there is almost 700 threat in tier 1 gear with Kelsrar and Mira Song. Those are very easy things to get. So don't spend a ton of time looking at different videos and looking at different resources and tracking stuff down. And like I said, this is not, I don't consider this to be the Bible, but these numbers are also not close. It's not like this sim is showing this at 1,000 and full Prot at 900. They're not that close. Player skill does get taken into account. How well you can keep up with your cooldowns should get taken into account. How well your healers can keep you up, because like I said, if you die, it really doesn't matter how much threat you were putting out. Now you're putting out 0 when you die. But pound for pound, even in phase 1 gear, Fury Prot is going to put out more threat. And if you can take the damage, if your healers can take the extra damage and keep you up, because you will take extra damage as Fury Prot. You're not going to have a shield on 100% like a full Prot will. But you will be a much better main tank in the terms of threat. You will be a much better off tank, chase tank in the terms of threat. You will be putting out a lot more DPS. So I think we retook the screenshot, but if you remember, I think the DPS was 200 and change for a full prot in this gear setup, and we're double that. We're at 577. So when it comes to damage, tanks are usually on the bottom. Tanks are still on the bottom in Nax, but I've looked at different logs, and the tanks that we have in Nax put out more DPS than some rogues and other guilds that are doing BWO and AQ40. If you're geared properly and you're doing your rotation properly, you can pump out an obscene amount of threat as Fury Prot. And if your healers are good, they can keep you alive. Because it doesn't really matter if your healers, let's say your healers, if you're deep prot and you're wearing a shield 100% of the time, your healers are healing you, and it takes 350 or 400 healing per second to keep you alive on a boss. And I'm not just every single boss, because not every single boss is the same. They don't all have the same abilities. They don't have the same raid damage. They don't have the same swing timer. Broodlord can hit you with an 8k Mortal Strike. Not every boss has that. But just in general, if it takes, let's say, 400 healing to keep you up as a full prot tank, and you're putting out, 600 threat per second, and your DPS are sitting there pressing the button once every 5 seconds because they can't, if they Sinister Strike too much, they're going to pass you up on the threat meter. If those healers in the fight at 50% mana, or if they're not using dark runes or mana pots or whatever, they're not using their cooldowns, they have much more capability than what they just presented, if that makes sense. So if it takes 400 healing to keep you up, and then you swap to Fury Prot, and now it takes 450 healing per second, or 500 healing per second, or even 600, if they are capable of pumping out that healing, then it doesn't make sense to stay deep prot. The healers should be healing as efficiently as possible, but also to their max potential, just like the DPS should be DPSing to their max potential. And if your guild's not like that, that's fine. I'm not, if you're in a guild and you guys are just casually want to do 20 mans and MC and whatever, and you're fine with the fights taking long, that's totally fine. What I'm saying is that the reason why most guilds have these deep prot tanks is because it lets everybody else, it lets the DPS do the max DPS they can possibly do, and then the healers don't have a boring job. There's more healing required, but again, circling back to, the DPS do more DPS because not only are the players better, but there's a much better, easier to obtain knowledge. There's YouTube, there's all kinds of websites, and healers are better as well for the same reasons. Down ranking has been optimized. Use these ranks at this level of gear, use these ranks at that level of gear. Don't stack crit, stack this instead. Here's why. Here's the spells you should be using in these situations, and never cast them in these situations. And in these boss fights, use this spell instead of that spell. All of that has been hashed out for years and years and years, and healers are much better than they were back in vanilla. So that's why Fury Prot is still a thing, and it's going to stay a thing. Unless Blizzard makes a change to the game, or makes a change to talent points, or there's some kind of Classic Plus mode that comes out later. You're going to want to probably be Fury Prot and learn how to play as Fury Prot. And I might do another video later on playing Fury Prot, or, the rotation, or maybe the gear or something. I don't know how in depth I want to get with it. I just wanted to go over this tank sim and show you guys the difference just by changing the talent points, how much less threat deep prot can do. Because for some reason, I still see it today that, the Classic has been out for, I think, almost 4 years at this point, and there's still deep prot warriors out there that argue that they do just as much threat, they're just as good. Deep prot has very few niche areas of the game, and that area could probably be better filled, honestly, with a feral druid. I think a feral druid would bring more to the table than a deep prot tank would inside of a raid, and that's almost any raid. I haven't spent a ton of time analyzing every single raid, but a feral warrior Yeah, Feral Warrior. Feral Druid. Um, like I said before, they are very good off tanks because very good chase tanks because they can generate a ton of threat without being hit, especially and they scale with their gear pretty well. Um, I've seen cat druids do a respectable amount of DPS. They have to have different gear sets for that, but so does a Fury Warrior if he wants to off tank. But also they have Innervate. There's certain heals they can if there's a certain fight. Shazra is one. Uh, Noth the Plaguebringer is another where decursing is a priority. There's a few fights where things like that are going on, and you need decurses. So you could tell the Feral, hey, I don't need you to tank or off tank. I need you to decurse this fight. And they can do that. They can put on a healing set of gear that has a lot of mana and a lot of intellect, and they can spam decurse. They bring a lot more utility than, and they're good on trash. They're good tanking trash. Deep Prot is probably okay on some trash for things that can be stunned, but in my opinion, Deep Prot really just doesn't have any place in an endgame raid, and even in early raids, I think it's debatable if you should bring one or not. Um, so yeah, hopefully this is helpful. Like I said, I'm not trying to sway people one way or the other. If you want to play Deep Prot or your guild wants to play Deep Prot, that's fine. Doesn't really matter to me. I'm more aiming at the player that is newer or coming back to the game, doesn't really understand Fury Prot, why Fury Prot is a thing. Why are tanks dual wielding? Don't they need to have a shield? Why did all these videos that I'm watching from 3 years ago say, is it still the same as it was 3 years ago? Yes, it is. All those content creators, I think, have moved on to other versions of the game. They're either in SOD or they're in Cataclysm or whatever. But I'm just, to those players, what I just showed you guys, this is why. And it's going to stay that way. The higher up in gear you get, the better Fury Prot scales. So once you go Fury Prot, you will very likely never go back to Deep Prot, unless you want to change your style of play and you just want to tank 5-mans, or your guild for some reason wants you to have a Deep Prot or two, and or they're. I joked about this to my guild recently that maybe we should. There's hardcore mode, right, where you can't die of WoW. There's speedrunning guilds. There's all these different modes of gameplay that people invent inside of the game, and I said maybe we should bring back the classic vanilla experience in the form of raiding, meaning all tanks. There's the only warriors in the raid are Prot warriors. There's no Fury warriors. There's maybe one or two MS two-hand warriors. There's rogues that don't use slice and dice. They just eviscerate on all the bosses. And then we could record that, but nobody wants to do that because it wouldn't be fun. It'd be stressful on healers. It probably wouldn't be. I think it would be fun because I'm a tank, but I don't think it would be fun for anyone else. DPS would be bored to tears. Healers would be stressed to the max, and we'd have a ton of warriors that would just sit out and not be able to go. We probably wouldn't even be able to fill the raid because like a third of the raid these days or a quarter of the raid are warriors. So, but anyway, hopefully this was helpful. I might do some other Fury Prot videos later down the road. But for now, I think I'll end this one.